I want to see what.
Looks like it.
I got everything.
You see your mom?
Oh, I don't think she's on this one.
Oh. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chef Night.
Good night,
I am
everyone.
here with Chef Jude, and I'm Beth Ryder. Thank you all for joining. What are we making tonight?
Tonight, we're gonna elevate a classical dish, something that's home comfort food, and do some beef stroganoff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just when the weather started to get a little bit cooler.
Well,
Now
it
we're up
teased
to
us last week.
110.
Yeah, it teased us last week, so.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited because it seems like a pretty simple dish, but instead of putting like the typical hamburger in it, we're gonna use
some steak.
which is
Right? So
great,
you
right?
can use any beef and beef stroganoff. We're gonna use some sirloin steaks. It's really pretty simple. A lot of people like to overcook it, but we'll teach you how not to. And then we're gonna add a couple ingredients that aren't too traditional, but then it's gonna help elevate the dish. Also putting it on our Pappardelle Pasta, which is different than your normal egg noodle.
And why is it different? Tell us that, because I'm not used to that name.
So this is a similar pasta to fettuccine. It's a lot wider, but it is more of an egg based, like an egg noodle.
Okay.
So not so flour heavy, but more egg based of a pasta.
And is it typical I can buy it in my regular traditional grocery store?
Yes, so when you buy these, they'll typically always be in these fresh nests. So this is fresh pasta that's just been dried and ready to go.
Got it.
Huh?
Perfect. Love it. I love that we're doing something a little bit different.
Yep, and you'll
And-
see the difference of this pasta is a lot different than your other traditional extra white egg. So,
Wonderful. Very excited about that.
Cool.
And then we have mise en place. So how do we get started?
all right, so mise en place, everyone. If you haven't been on, welcome joining us this time. Mise en place means everything in its place. So what we want to start off with, we want to make sure we have a pot of water. Make sure it's going on. We're going to want to make sure we have a pot that's big enough to be able to fit all of our nests. I'll show you. Each nest is going to be about this big. So you're thinking about 2 nests per person. You know, think
Oh.
about the pasta when it's all done.
I
and
didn't
cooked
realize
up,
they were
right?
in those little nets.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And it's nice how that works out like this. I'll show you once we get going. You do want to keep this stirring quite a bit, so then that way, once the starch starts to release, we don't want these sticking together.
And I like that they come in nests because sometimes when you have just a box, like it's hard to figure out how much.
How much you're gonna use, right?
Because I always put way too much. We got way too much pasta. And then we're trying to figure out how to reuse it.
So generally, when you think about it, how many fettuccine noodles are in a pasta dish? 20 to 25? Maybe, right? So 20 is probably a good number.
Right.
So when you do that, think about that. Think about, all right, there's 1 portion, there's 2 portions, there's 3 portions right there, right off the bat. So then that way you can save your pasta for another dish, and then you don't have leftover pasta that you're like, well, what are we gonna do with this? Right?
Exactly. That's what we wonder.
The goal is if you do have leftover pasta, we have leftover sauce or tonight stroganoff.
Right.
So that way it makes an easy leftover for later in the week when you get crazy busy and you just need something to reheat and sit down and enjoy, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. So we got that
So we
going.
got that going. We got a cast iron skillet. We're gonna be searing in this skillet and we're gonna be making our sauce in that. So what we'll do is we'll sear our beef and then we're gonna remove it and then we're gonna finish our sauce.
Okay.
And then we're gonna add our beef back into it and then just let it simmer out and then we'll be ready to roll.
Perfect.
All right, then over here on the kitchen side, we have an onion, we have some sour cream, fresh chopped garlic, we got butter, Worcestershire, Dijon mustard. We have some cremini mushrooms. If you're not familiar with cremini mushrooms, these are baby bellas.
Oh,
So
that's
portobello
good.
mushroom,
Mhm.
and then there's small portobello mushrooms, and then there's creminis, which are more of a earthier, kind of sweeter mushroom than your typical button.
And a button is more the white.
The white would be
Okay.
a button mushroom, yep. So a lot more compact flavoring.
Good to
You'll
know.
see, and it is more earthy, right? A lot of people's fear of the mushroom is texture. They don't like that texture. If you were eating mushrooms sauteed and you still don't like that texture, why? Because the
Personal
most of the
problem.
time, yeah, most of the time, people say that they're slimy, right? Which typically is a mushroom that came out of a can. Because when you
Yeah.
saute mushrooms, they don't really get slimy unless you cut them too thin and overcook them. Something like this, we left pretty meaty. so that that way that's gonna hold its dignity.
They
And-
do cook down a little bit though, right?
They will release a lot of water, so
Okay.
they'll shrink some, but
Okay.
not a lot.
So shrink because of the water release.
Correct, and you're
Gotcha.
only gonna notice it on some that are smaller, so even this one's a little thicker of a cut,
Right.
but only if, let's say, you slice your mushrooms and they're thinner, right? So if you're working with something like this, then that's when they're gonna shrink a lot more, because we're gonna lose a lot more water out
Got it.
faster,
Faster.
right?
Okay, makes sense.
We have our steak all diced up and ready to go. The recipe says strips. You can dice it, you can do strips, whichever you'd like. The technique of cooking is still gonna be the same.
And consistent amongst the meat, right?
Pretty much everything, right? So
Yeah.
when we're building our dish, we do wanna think about that. When I'm making beef stroganoff or a hearty type stew, I want the mushrooms to be recognized. Even if I'm gonna do like sauteed onions and mushrooms on the
Right.
steak, I want the mushroom to still be present to the dish.
That
Right,
makes
so
sense.
when you cut them real thin or they're sliced really thin, like you would put on a burger,
Right.
you kind of lose that integrity of the mushroom. And that's where you get that sliminess that people don't really like, because the mushroom's pretty firm by
Right.
texture, it's kind of spongy, great for vegetarian. Right, so I like to keep them more hearty so that that way it's more prevalent to the dish. Okay,
Makes sense.
we got some fresh thyme, some fresh parsley, some heavy cream, a little bit of beef broth. So first things first, what we want to do is we want to chop our onion. And the reason I left this guy ready to go, so to show you a way to do it. There's a couple different ways you can do it. To get the smallest dice that you want to leave the bulb intact. Okay, so then you would cut it in half. You would remove the outer layer here. And then this way, when you go to like, you're trying to make a small dice, really, really small for something, means you want the flavor of the onion in there, but you don't want to really recognize it. So it's going to cook and be kind of lost, so you don't take a bite of an onion.
Right.
Right?
Makes sense.
We don't want it to be that small here, but I just want to show you that technique piece. So that way, what you do is when you leave your bulb on, you'll make slits this way. The more slits we make going down, what that does is it's helping to break. The more cuts we make this way, the smaller
The piece.
the pieces are, right? So you see here, the more cuts we make, the smaller our dice is, right? For tonight's application, we don't want to be this small. These aren't going to matter because we're still wanting the flavor. I was thinking we want to keep something along this size right here, right? And how do we do that? So I'll take both sides off. I'll gauge this. Do I want half of it or do I want to go in thirds? It all depends on what, how big of a chunk of onion you want.
How
Right?
much of that onion you want?
Right, to take a bite of.
Take a bite of.
If you don't really like onion, cut it this small.
Okay,
Okay.
so good to know. So
If-
you can make it to your liking, really chop it. however
Right,
you like.
so the onion's gonna add a lot of flavor that we really, really wanna capture. If you don't like the taste of onion, keep it small,
Okay,
don't add as many.
what do you think in ours? We do it in thirds?
I was thinking,
or halves?
I was thinking in half,
Okay,
so then we can do, this would be like a half julienne. So then we would just slice it down,
that's a good sign.
so that way it'll be prevalent, but as it cooks, it's gonna shrink.
Right,
So when there's little strips like this, you'll still get a bite of it and it'll be nice to recognize that, but it's not gonna be overpowering. The reason we're using white onions is because the white, this one's a yellow, to be honest. A yellow onion is the best onion to cook with, to saute with, right? A red onion is gonna be more to eat raw in your salad, on a sandwich,
Yeah.
on your burger. The white onion you can cook with, it's not as sweet as this, so it's a little different. White onions are typically used in fresh eating, like pico de gallo,
that makes sense.
what do you wanna call it, bruschetta, what's another one? Just like your onion and cilantro for
Something
your
in
tacos.
cold, something
Yeah.
cold.
So we'll take the whole piece off. Take this guy off, we're gonna go in half, like that. And then we're just gonna chop it down to the size that we want. And then I turn it to the flat edge, so that way it doesn't try to roll on you when you make that cut on the other side.
Right. I wanted to mention one other thing too that I noticed with some of our herbs, like when we bought the herbs, so right here. You see how this is a little firm right now? Well, it was out of water, so it was very droopy this morning because I had put it in the refrigerator. So what I did was I put it in a vase of water and it came back to life. So if you do have it and yours isn't quite where you want it to be, maybe a little droopy, definitely put it in a little bit of water and it perks back up so you can reuse the rest of it and just set it on your counter. And that really helps.
Yeah, so leaving this out on your counter, especially in this time right now when it's not so hot, it's just like flowers.
Right.
If you change that water every single day, those herbs will stay there. Essentially, they'll then start to grow new herbs. Right? So a little aquaponics right there on the counter.
Okay. Well, I thought it was amazing because I did it this morning and they were all droopy, put them in water. I'm like, oh, they popped right back up and we could probably use them for several days.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like our bodies, adding hydration perks it back up, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So
tip
now
of the day.
we'll get started. We're gonna turn our cast iron skillet on.
Perfect.
We're gonna get it going nice and high, get it nice and hot. We're gonna be sauteing our beef first, and what we're gonna wanna do is I'm gonna grab a plate here. Now, one thing we wanna focus on in this process is we're gonna look at how much beef we have here to the surface size of our pan. If we were to dump all of this in there, we would then start to lose the sear factor because the moisture of the beef would be released and then it would be starting to stew, to braise, right? We don't want that. We want to sear this as best as possible. So we're gonna do it probably in 3 little batches, just telling by the size here so that there's enough surface space to keep it hot on the pan, but also so we're able to turn the beef enough around to sear. We're not gonna go and sear all 8 sides, that's it. But we're gonna brown it up enough so that that way it does get a good sear, right?
Perfect. I like that point though, because it's easier to dump it all in, but you're not gonna get the same result.
It's
Because
gonna
of that.
totally change it, right? Also, what's gonna happen is the fat that's gonna be released in that process, mixing with the water, that gray tinge to it.
Right.
We're gonna wanna try to eliminate that by putting less in at a time. It's gonna eliminate that. We don't want that fat in the pan for when we start making our sauce, because that's gonna float on the top. It's not gonna blend in well or incorporate that we want, right?
Wonderful.
So that's that little tidbit there. A little bit of olive oil. We're gonna go fairly generous to get us started, so that way we can only add a little bit more as we need to add each additional.
Wonderful.
So as you can see, our pan's getting pretty hot. We're not quite ribboning up there. And I'll grab a spoon here.
So while you're doing that, we wanted to talk about, we've had so many people want to get ingredients coming up. So I wanted to mention that what we're doing now is we are picking 20 people at random. So we're no longer picking from the first 20 that register, because we want to make sure that everyone's randomly selected, because we want to have different people all the time join our cooking class. But we also would like you all to, you can increase the ability to be selected by liking us on Facebook, giving us good reviews on Google, coming, attending our class, making comments in the chat, and posting photos. We want participants that are gonna come and join us and work with us together. So we can't really accommodate all the requests, but we want to make sure that you guys know that we are, you know, we love having all of you on. And if you don't get ingredients, we'd love for you to still join, and we're happy to send you the recipe in advance so you can still cook along. So we'd love everyone to come. It's just, we're only giving out 20. And I know some people were disappointed this week, but we just can't give it to everybody.
Well, and it shows that our class is growing,
Right.
you know, which is the
Absolutely.
whole purpose. We want everyone to understand that you too can be a gourmet chef in the comfort of your own home.
Exactly.
Right. So as you saw, as hot as our pan is, and as quickly as we browned it up, right?
Yeah.
Now, we're not looking to cook this through. All we're trying to do is get a good sear on this, right? So it's still really rare on the inside. So we're gonna start pulling this bad guy out.
So you're browning it on the outside, but you're really not getting like a crispy crust. So that would be too hot, right?
No. It's okay. If it starts to get a crust on it, that's fine. The reason it's not getting a crispy crust like such is because we're not leaving it on the surface of the pan long enough.
Okay.
We have to continuously stir that around, as you saw, so we can brown all of it, right?
Okay.
Second, if we continue to leave it in there to get that crispy crust all the way around, then it would be fully done. And we're not trying to fully cook it in this portion of it, right? Because we want to maintain this to be as tender as possible.
Got it.
In order to do that, we got to keep this rare because we're going to add that back into the sauce later
Got
to
it.
finish up in there. So if you were to drop it in, let it sit there, sing happy birthday to your best friend, be 20 seconds, then you make a stir. For this, since we're using the cast iron, it retains the heat so well.
Right.
I'm continuously stirring it so that way one side isn't cooking more than another side, right?
And we're
And-
not overcooking.
Right, and you see, there's hardly any water being released from the beef right now.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Right, because we don't have so much of it in there, so it keeps the surface of our pan nice and hot to allow us to get the sear that we're trying to get.
And is your temperature all the way on high?
Mine is all the way on high.
Okay.
Yep.
So while we're doing this, we want to say hi to Dennis Webb. Dennis, thank you for joining. We have Tom on, Bob is on. We have Pat, Marianne, and everyone else I didn't mention. Thank you all again. We appreciate you all joining us tonight.
Absolutely. And put your suggestions in the chat box for next season. It's right around the corner. We want to
Very
get as
quick.
many ideas as we possibly can. Beth and I were pitching some ideas just earlier that we got, but the more participation, like she said, the better. So then that way we can continue to try to show our audience what it is that they're looking for.
Can we give them a little highlight while we're cooking up this meat? That we were talking about little things, maybe it'll stir your cooking
Creativity, yeah.
But we were thinking something like maybe one of our events would be learn how to cook with pear, like the pear. So maybe you could do an appetizer, maybe bruschetta, maybe you could show you how to make a pear salad, and then use pear in addition. You had a good one. What was that suggestion?
Doing like a pear and sage stuffing to go with like roasted chicken, Cornish game hen or something like that.
So wouldn't that be a fun transition of how to use a pear in the cooking?
So
environment?
typically our idea was, how can we take ingredients that you wouldn't think of cooking with? You enjoy that ingredient, a pear, a peach, a plum,
Yeah.
right? A blueberry, all these things that, I would never think about putting blueberries into my mole over chicken, and show you how easy that is and how delicious it is.
And it started when we were talking tonight about you were making a dish with a cherry.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what started us discussing
Mhm.
use of fruit in a different way. And that might be a lot of fun for next season.
Yeah, because I had some bean cherries, as you all know, at the beginning of the summer that go on sale. They're cheap. I could eat a whole bag in one sitting. It's not good for you, but what do we do with these, right?
Right.
Sitting there thinking like, hey, got these lamb chops and I bought these cherries, and then I had some leftover goat cheese. I was like, well, what if we make a goat cheese and pistachio crusted lamb chop with a roasted cherry risotto? So taking these ingredients to the next level is really what we're trying to show you, is a simple process. So
And I love those ideas for next year. Those were great ones that we just sort of talked about today that I think would be great, but we're trying to spur your creativity too, add something to that. We'd love to make something that we haven't made before.
Right, and something like the lamb chop. People love it or they hate it. I'm not a big fan of it, but I do like it. That's something that if you went to a restaurant and ordered that, that dish is gonna cost you easily $70. Easily. So if to show you that, you buy your lack of ram at Costco, right?
Yep.
When they're on sale and your cherries are on sale, everything's discounted, so to speak, because it's during the season. So
Yep.
we're utilizing the seasonal ingredients to show you, you too can be a gourmet chef in the comfort of your own home.
I love that. So we want your feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys would love us to cook. What did you do now? We put the onions in?
I just did a little more oil. I kept my pan still on high, right? We're gonna saute still. I added my onions just to get them going a little bit. The reason being is I want the onion to caramelize slightly before I add in a bunch of water,
Got it.
right? If I added these in first,
It wasn't gonna.
we were
caramelize.
not gonna be able to caramelize. Also, what we're doing is we're creating more fond on the bottom of the pan. You can get in closely here and see this. All this stuff that's sitting on the bottom, it's called fond. It's all the sugar released from our beef. Now we're adding onion. So we're releasing the sugar from the onion, creating more flavor, which is gonna help really make the richness of this dish pop out.
Love it.
Yep. So now we got a nice little caramelization. You can see the onions are getting a little translucent, right? So they're cooking down nicely. I really like that, the caramelization of it. Add that flavor to that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Some casserole ideas. All right.
Great for the winter.
Absolutely. And they're easy, right? And they're wholesome. They're also very
They're
effective.
Easy to share.
I was gonna say they're very effective to have as your guests come over for the holidays, and you don't have to slave away in the kitchen, right?
And I would love to see like an elevated casserole, something more gourmet than, oh, that I'm from the Midwest, so the typical throw it in there, you know, I just want to do something a little more elevated.
The red pot casserole, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
That's a good one. It's something we're challenged by it.
And it's comfort food, makes you feel good, right?
I'm really enjoying the commentary along the way. It's two-sided trading.
On
Love
our
it.
commercial breaks.
Yeah.
Oh, one more. How about dishes with apple for October?
Oh, okay, I love that.
Yep.
Apples for October and pumpkin for November. As you can see, we already have some of our decorations out, which I love getting into I'm just hoping this helps cool down the temperatures. Because it's hot.
It's a mental thing.
It is
It is
a
a
mental. I'm
mental-
like, let's decorate.
We're ready.
Let's fall.
Yeah, we're ready for it.
Tuscan pork tenderloin in a baguette over garlic, mashed potatoes, and pork and gravy.
Okay,
Oh, so, okay, Tuscan pork tenderloin in a baguette over mashed potatoes with gravy. Pork gravy.
so we wouldn't put the baguette in there. We would do it on the side as a side piece to that. I don't know how your sandwich and your potatoes are gonna go well unless we add the potato into the sandwich. You could get away with that. But that's a good one.
We'll have to be creative on how do we elevate that dish?
That's right.
That's just one we've got to kind of do a little combo. Surprise our.
So here's pork tenderloin is cheap and it's delicious.
And it's usually really tender, which is the tenderloin, but it's not dry, which I really like about it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of internal fat, a lot of
Right.
marbling of the fat in there.
Yeah.
That's what makes a huge difference in it, right? All right, so now that we got our mushrooms going, sauteed.
And how's everybody doing out there? Are you guys keeping up? We had a little bit extra meat, so it took us a little bit longer, but how are your dishes going?
We're gonna add our garlic.
That looks delicious.
I think this is one of my favorite combinations of cooking right here, is
Me
the
too.
onion and the mushroom. And
Mine
just
too.
the smell of it, and it
Love
just
it.
gets me excited. I love
And
it.
Steve is not with us today. We all hope he does well. He had shoulder, torn rotator cuff today. So he's resting. But, he's not a mushroom fan, so that would be his favorite. He'll pick out the mushroom.
We would be leaving the mushrooms out
Oh,
of the
yeah,
stroganoff,
yeah.
yeah. What was it, it was olives, the last.
Yeah, all of the
olives.
mushrooms are, his only two negative.
Well, right now we're gonna turn the heat down slightly. We're gonna let this kind of saute up a little bit
I
more.
love that. Looks
Will be a
great.
great opportunity to showcase our Syrah.
Okay.
Tonight's pairing, a nice red Syrah.
From France.
So this is something that you're gonna wanna
We had in the refrigerator,
enjoy nicely. Yep.
so you guys
Your
would have,
preference, you like cold wine or you want?
I sometimes
temperature?
in the summer, when it's hot outside, I do like to put my red and just cool it down a little bit, just because it's warm out.
And that's all we did, but this was only, what, 2 hours maybe?
Yeah, exactly. It was just chilled a little bit because it wasn't like, I wanted to bring it above room temperature.
Right,
So it
Which is-
wasn't like in there forever. So-
wasn't for the palate, right?
Exactly.
So now that we have that out and we're getting some good saute action here, we're gonna take a teeny tiny bit of it.
I was gonna ask, did you put that in there?
We're not traditionally, but we are because we want to release the fond. In order to do that, we're gonna add a little bit of acid to then strip all that sugar.
And you notice how
the
immediately
bottom.
it started dripping out.
Absolutely. So we'll show them right here in the corners.
I mean, it's just amazing how that does, that acid really takes that off.
Yeah,
And it brings all the goodness back into
that's
the plate.
all flavor. Yeah, absolutely. We want to keep that.
How would you release it? Using water?
I would try to use any type of wine cooking, any wine really. Depends. So like in this dish, I traditionally wouldn't add the red wine. I would do white wine. Since we're drinking this and only putting a little bit in here, we're not gonna taste that a whole lot. If we were taking these ingredients and doing a beef bourguignon,
Mhm.
we would then be adding a
Right.
lot more of this, right?
Right.
So the technique is essentially exactly the same, except we're replacing red wine
Yeah.
with sour cream for the stroganoff.
Right.
Leave the sour cream out and use your red wine, and then you're doing more of a bourguignon.
We also buy, there's a little 4-pack you can buy, a very tiny little wine bottle that we will use when we cook with.
This is what I constantly,
Oh,
this is
yeah,
all I use.
yeah, just, so
Because
it's
it's enough.
inexpensive
Yeah, it's
and
just
you
enough.
cook with this, and we do it all the time, yes. We found that in there.
Instead of cracking open your bottle.
Like a whole bottle, that's expensive or more expensive than that little one. Yeah, and plus you can save it. They just don't last that long, so that's why a little goes a long way.
Add some beef broth here, because we're gonna need to make more gravy than everybody else.
So depending on how many people you have for dinner, you can add a little extra broth.
Yep, so in the event, I would hit a little bit of water to this pan, and that's gonna help release that fond a little bit more. But you definitely wanna use the acid to start, because that's really what's gonna strip it off the bottom of the pan. Plus, it helps with the dish.
Right, absolutely. And cast iron skillets, I mean,
Yeah, this is
not everybody's favorite to clean.
It's not everyone's favorite to clean. But it is a very good piece of cooking equipment. So
Absolutely.
that's the goal.
Mhm. We use ours like every day. It's worth the investment.
I agree. So now what I'm gonna want to do. Did you try, there, try the wine. Cheers.
Cheers. And cheers to everyone out there. It's very good.
Fairly sweet.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any wine recommendations?
As far as any wines,
Yes.
um.
any of the Arizona strongholds, anything from the Page Springs, the Caduceus Cellars, the Merkin Vineyards, those are all Arizona wines. Obviously get into Napa Valley, wines from Chile, Australian
Argentina.
wines if you're looking for white, yeah, Argentina. Your best bet is to just start trying, you know.
And it depends on if you like white or red.
And really, one of the best things is look in the New Times, because I know that they advertise when they do wine tastings. Try to get yourself a hold of one of those. Even go and try flights. So when you're out, you see places do flights of wine. That's where you're really going to start to expand your liking of what you like and what you don't like as far as the wine goes. I'm definitely supportive to the locals, so drink their wines if I can. So what we're doing is we're just de-stemming the thyme. We're going to want to get that in right now because we're going to want to release the oils and get this flavor into that dish. Me personally, I never de-stem it. I just throw it in there. And the reason being is because then I just pull the stems out. Seems like it's easier, but that's my process.
Hey,
If
I
you
got a
have
quick
butcher's
question.
twine, just tie it up and then toss it in, and then you can just pull it out.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Have you dropped your pasta yet?
Almost. We're
Okay,
still reducing our sauce.
got it. Thank you.
You got it.
Because the pasta that we have is actually gonna cook a lot faster than
Your
your
traditional.
traditional really hard pasta, right? That you
Yes.
would buy.
So we're gonna add a little more broth to ours because we're gonna need more gravy.
But our pasta water is ready to go whenever we're ready.
Yep. So let that do its thing. So. We're gonna teach you a cheating trick here.
Eating trick.
Uh-huh. Skip the step. But that's okay. Flour.
Oh, we didn't put the flour in.
We
Okay.
needed to make the roux first,
Oh,
but that's all right.
so when would we have normally thrown this in?
Right after you deglaze. So it would be add the butter and then add your add your butter, melt it, add your flour, cook it up a little bit. But you see how we're thickening now?
Right.
So as you
So
see,
we're
I'm
just gonna push that back in.
I'm just dusting it because we don't want any clumps. So all we're doing is being able to make that through. And what we're gonna do with our
And I like that you're adding a little at a time so you don't get big clumps here.
well, and we're able to control the consistency, right?
Right.
So now you can see the thickness
that's
of it when we start incorporating everything. And all I did was I moved everything to one side, so I'm just mixing the broth and the flour together.
Got it.
Mhm.
You said it's with cornstarch.
So if you were going to substitute with cornstarch, we would do that at the very end. So we would make our sauce and bring it up to what we want. And then we would add our slurry. So we would mix our cornstarch with some water and add that at the end to get the consistency of thickness that we're looking for. We want to take a little bit of our sauce, because we're going to want to temper our sour cream. Which means we're going to heat it up slightly. So we need a quarter cup of this. So the reason we do this process, the reason that we temper it, is so that way, if we were just to add the sour cream into right now,
you wouldn't be a nice smooth texture. So all I'm doing is just adding some more broth. So we can thin our sauce. As you see. So anytime it starts to get too thick on you, just add a little bit of water, a little bit of broth. And you're able to work. So as that roux cooks, wants to continuously thicken our sauce. That's why we only do a little bit at a time. There we go. Looks like a good consistency there. We're going to turn our heat down slightly, just so it's at a nice medium heat. We're going to take a couple spoons of our sauce here. We're just going to put it in here so it can warm this up and temper it.
So you don't put in just the cold?
No, because then you'll have chunks of the sour cream in there. But if we temper our sour cream and mix it in. So a little bit more.
So that part I didn't know, so that's really a good tip.
Well, if you remember adding it before, it always had chunks of the sour cream.
Absolutely.
Right? And that. Our heavy cream. Shake. You can use milk if you'd like. You can thin out your sour cream a little bit more and just use more sour cream if you wanted to. I'm just rinsing off what we have so I can stir. The cream though is what's going to give it the richness.
Right.
So if you're going to use milk, then it's not going to be as rich.
Right.
And now that we've basically tempered our cream, so we turned our heat down so that way we don't potentially break our cream. Right. So now it's just at a simmer. Set this aside for a moment. Let's drop our pastas.
I wanted to show everybody too, just a couple of the wines that Steve and I like to drink. The Salvo on the end is, you can buy all these at Total Wine, really mostly any grocery store. That's a Zinfandel. Bella Gloss is a Pinot Noir. We like Cabernet, that's a Dow. And then for a really good price Chardonnay, Olima you can buy at Total Wine as well. Those are just some of our favorites.
Get that ready. So since we skipped the roux step and we kind of modified it, we're going to finish the sauce with the butter, which means to mount the sauce.
Okay.
It's going to tighten it up a little bit more, but then it's going to help give it a velvety texture and a flavor profile.
Okay.
So really changing that piece to it.
So even though we didn't do it in the right order, we can still,
Absolutely. We can
it'll still make a
Yep.
great dish.
Absolutely.
Even the best people do it in the wrong order.
Yeah. Well, like I said, once I get cooking, for me, it's just cooking. So
Right.
following the recipe, that's something that I'm not worried about because I already know. We skipped the step. I already know that we can then adjust and adapt and still make the same great dish that we intended to make in the beginning.
Wonderful.
So you want to just pasta
Kind of break
next?
them apart, yeah.
Yep, they're just barely starting to get softened up in there. This guy's still doing its thing.
Any questions out there? Any questions you guys have? I think while we're cooking, we can discuss the market just a little bit. The interest rate has settled down, so as low as 4.75% up to 5.25%, which is fantastic for everybody. Just wanted to kind of remind you all, like our inventory is growing. So we're almost to 20,000. We're at 19,500 active listings. So we are growing, which is very typical at the end of every summer. So it's a great opportunity to buy now. The interest rate is stabilized, gone down just a little bit. And we always talk about this, but keep your home, keep that low interest rate, and continue to have an investment that's growing by today's market, which is lower than it was. And currently keep your asset. You can hop in.
You're
and say
good,
you're
you're good.
Okay. And want to make sure that, you call us if you want just a home valuation, want to know what your home is worth, want to know what your options are out there, which builders might be giving you a low interest rate. We'd love for you to just give us a call and let us talk to you about how you can build your wealth through real estate in any way that you want, whether you're buying, whether you're selling, whether you're holding, whether you want to buy investment properties. We're happy to be there for you and just help you kind of figure out what the right path is for you. So give us a call. We'd love to work with you, and anyone on our team can help you out. And that's all that I had for today. Any questions? Anybody have a question about what's going on out there in the market? Everybody's eating or finishing their dish. So I think we're all.
All right, so now we got a nice simmer going. Sauce is coming along nicely.
But
Yes.
will prices of homes go up when the interest rate drops further?
It could if we have more people buying and the inventory is going down, then yes, it would raise prices. And we will see that home builders will be raising prices. So we know that if it does settle down and their homes are selling, they will continue to raise their prices. So now is a great time if you want to look at purchase price. So people that bought in 22 and 23 right now are going to be probably close to what they bought before. So the prices haven't gone up. So it's a great time because they've stabilized to buy now before they do go up. But if there is a lot of demand because of a lower interest rate, you're going to see resale and new construction going up.
Will the builder incentives still stay?
Those also go down. The minute that they have more demand and it's harder to keep their inventory available, their incentives will go down. And historically, we've seen that happen. So the incentives today, buying the interest rate down, contributing bigger numbers towards closing costs than we've seen in a long time, that is the advantage of today's market. And remember, whenever you sell and buy at the same time, you're at the same market. So if you do it today or tomorrow, it's the same, right? You might get a little more in your house, but you're going to pay a little more for the other one. If you sell it for less than you wanted, you're going to pay less than you thought. So same, we're buying and selling at the same time.
Makes sense to me.
Yes.
Yep.
And a lot of people forget that. They're like, I want to wait till I get more for my house. They don't realize that they're going to pay more for the next one.
Right, absolutely. All right, so we're gonna add our Worcestershire. And we're gonna add our Dijon.
I find it interesting with the Dijon that it's not very much, but it does change the dish.
Oh, it just adds,
A lot of different flavor.
yeah, absolutely.
And it just spreads evenly through all of that, which is amazing. Because it
And
doesn't
it's
seem like you're
not-
putting much in there.
It's not pungent, right? So,
Right.
I mean, it is if you were just to take a bite of it. But when you add it to things like this, like when I make my creamy horseradish sauce for roast beef,
Mhm.
I like to put a little bit in there, because then that changes that
Right.
profile, right? So it adds a little bit more of a earthier note. That's not just horseradish and sorry,
Right.
I even put a little bit of the Worcestershire in that sauce as well.
Good to know.
So now that we're at this stage there, we're gonna go ahead and add our sour cream. Let's take a look at our pasta. Okay, these guys are coming right along. You see the nests are now fully broken up. And if you haven't had these noodles, you're gonna see how different they are. These things are, once you eat these, I think personally, once I've eaten them, I don't want to have any other pasta. That's just my
Good to
personal.
know.
They absorb the sauce so well and it's not so heavy like your traditional pastas. So remember, we've added two ingredients that are thickening agents, our mustard and our sour cream. So if you notice that your sauce gets a little bit thicker, you can add a little bit of water, but don't want to add it too soon because then you're going to have too thin of a sauce and then you're going to go back to the cornstarch and water method to tighten it back up, which is fine. If you're at a stage right now, he says, oh, that's not enough gravy. We need more of that. Add some water.
What about the broth?
Make your slurry. Yeah, if you want to add the broth, absolutely. I would recommend add your broth. If you're all out of broth because you've already used it all, then a little bit of water is going to be fine. And then you can add your slurry. So you see, since I tempered the sour cream, nice and smooth.
Right.
There's none of those little clumps in there that
Mhm.
never actually melt, right?
Commented, I agree, those noodles have a good tone.
It's
Right.
it's different.
Yeah.
But what's nice is how it absorbs, just absorbs the sauce so nicely.
Are you gonna add any pasta water to your sauce?
I am not going to add any pasta water to my sauce. If you need to add some to yours, you can go ahead and do so. I feel like we're going to release some natural
Juices from
right here as
Okay.
we add that, which is better than adding our pasta water.
Okay, cool.
I grabbed that.
Oh, you already did?
Yep.
Me too.
While we were on a commercial break.
I was like, I swear I didn't see it. Oh, sneaky.
So we're going to make sure that we get all of our beef mixed into here. We're going to turn our heat back up slightly because we're going to want to simmer that beef. While our noodles are finishing, so is our beef.
Wow, and that looks like a really hearty, great sauce. That looks amazing.
And you can see there's a pretty good ratio. I would probably, just looking at like this right now, we're gonna add a touch more because I want just a little bit more of
What do you
the
need?
broth. So when we're looking at it, think about when you take a scoop of this and what that's gonna be like on the bowl, right?
Right,
You don't want it to be, you don't want the noodles to be submerged in sauce,
right.
but you're gonna want a little more sauce than
Beef.
and noodle, right? So
Right.
that way you're gonna want to be able to absorb that sauce with
Makes
your
sense.
noodles. So we're just gonna add a little bit more.
Sure, do you know any light sides that would go well with something?
So asparagus, cauliflower. I mean, you can go broccoli if you want. You could go heavier on your mushroom. You could you could do carrots if you wanted to get a little color there. So there's, I mean, lots of different things. As like, this is a dish in itself. So if I were to add anything as a side, I would make it a vegetable.
I would put peas,
Peas,
yeah.
yeah, peas would be a classic across the Midwest.
Yeah, and across the middle, and also color. You're adding some color there.
So we're taking a look at our pasta noodle here. Cooked all the way through. You don't see any white in there like that. Still kind of firm. Almost. We're almost there.
Is anybody done yet there? Has anybody finished? You plated? Nope, we're all still cooking?
Letting it simmer down.
Hmm?
Excellent.
Said, will it make a big difference if we use cream instead of sour cream?
So the sour cream is an essential ingredient into the stroganoff because of the flavor profile. If you were using just heavy cream, which you could do, it wouldn't technically be stroganoff. So the sour cream is what makes it the stroganoff, whether it's beef, chicken, pork. That's all you need.
So we could substitute the beef, so we could do hamburger.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously did the
Chicken.
steak.
We can do veal, you can do
Okay.
pork. So all of those would go
Cooking
well.
the exact same way?
Yes.
Okay,
The veal, you wouldn't really dice the veal like this. Typically, you would get veal as a cutlet.
right,
So you would cut the strips and your cooking process would be super fast.
but, yeah,
If you had a veal cutlet, I would leave it as a cutlet and sear like we would a steak.
Oh,
And then cut the strips and then add it in here
because
to
it's too thin,
finish,
yeah.
right?
Otherwise it
So
makes
all
you-
we're doing is finishing in there, yep.
That makes sense. I
So-
like that it has a lot of opportunity.
And
And
then
if you don't, if
eat
you
meat?
actually, or what if you didn't eat the mushrooms? Let's just say, what could I substitute a mushroom in this dish with? That if I just didn't like them?
cauliflower,
Oh,
right? So
would
it's,
you cook it the same way?
it'll be similar. It'll be less cooking time. The mushroom's gonna hold up a lot more than the cauliflower.
You don't wanna
Um,
get mush.
The floret of the cauliflower is gonna break down more than any of the stem, but it's still gonna hold the integrity fairly well. So it'll still be meaty. So like the same cooking time, you're still gonna be okay. If we were reducing this for 30 minutes, no way. You would wanna add that later in the process.
Got it.
Said, is it okay to use chicken stock for this dish?
You can use your chicken stock. It's only gonna lighten it, right? So the beef is a heavier stock, which is gonna give it a heavier taste when you go to eat it. So this is done. We don't wanna overcook that beef. So we're gonna stop it.
Okay,
Our pasta's ready to go.
all right. We're getting on the home stretch here.
We're gonna take a little bit of our butter. We're gonna cut it. Mine's a little too soft. So typically what you'd wanna do with this is you'd wanna have butter that's straight out of the refrigerator. So that way when you add it here, is then what's called mounting. So when you do that, it adds that rich velvety flavor, but also it helps thicken your sauce when it's cold butter. If it's melted butter, then it's just melted butter and it'll sit on top and it won't do anything. But as you see, since it is cold, we're combining it to the sauce. Right, so we're emulsifying it so that way it becomes smooth in texture and not just a layer of melted butter on top.
Chef, can you show what brand of beef stock you're using, please?
This is from Pacific Foods.
And really, anything you're gonna buy in a box like this is gonna be typical standard, right?
Correct.
We always buy it, we keep it in our pantry. Like we always have stock in a box like this.
Even the
Always.
little cubes.
Okay,
The little cubes are
work
golden.
as well?
Yep.
Because they don't go bad.
Yeah, and for what we did for ours, for your size, 2 should be plenty. For our size, 4.
Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Do I have a bowl here?
Here's this if you need it.
Perfect.
Okay, the plating, which is the fun part.
Someone said that they like better than bouillon too.
The better than bouillon, so that's very similar. So it's a beef concentrate. So you're able to mix it with the heavy cream or just even with some water. You can mix it with the wine and then you're making a stock right off food, straight out of the refrigerator or off the shelf. And you can add it to this as well.
Someone said, can you please show the bottle of red wine again?
The one we are cooking with?
Yes.
And I believe we got this wine either Costco or Total Wine, one of the two. Total Wine.
Take some of our fresh parsley here. Just the leaves. Give it a nice chop. And like that, your beef stroganoff.
Just like that. And coming up, October 23rd, we're gonna have brown.
A brown butter
butter.
saged pan-seared sea scallops.
Ooh, my favorite.
My favorite, with a roasted cauliflower puree. So show you how you've seen the cauliflower mashed potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Something very similar to that.
That sounds great and lighter than a potato.
Healthier than a
healthier.
potato.
I
Absolutely.
like that.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate the opportunity and make sure you send us photos. We want to see what your dishes look like and hopefully you enjoy your elevated stroganoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Take care. Have a
Good
great
night.
evening.
Good night.